This scholar has devoted nearly 30 years of his life to studying international relations and the Vietnamese people's resistance war against the US imperialist military. Along that journey, he met many historical witnesses, accessed invaluable sources, and conducted significant research. With his outstanding contributions, he has been honored with several prestigious scientific awards, including the 2003 Kenneth W. Baldrige Prize, and has been named one of the 2013 Arthur Goodside Book Award winners.
Lần đầu tôi gặp Pierre, tôi nhận ra anh ấy rất thông minh. It was clear from the start that Pierre was out to learn as much as he possibly could about Vietnam and to improve his understanding of the language and culture of the Vietnamese people.
Hiểu nhiều hơn về lịch sử Việt Nam.
Thực sự mà nói là tôi rất là ngạc nhiên khi mà có một nhà sử học mà có thể nói được tiếng Việt giỏi như anh Pierre Asselin.
I was following in Pierre's footsteps, and I started to study about the history of Vietnam during the Cold War period. He pushed me to learn Vietnamese.
That is Professor Pierre Asselin, a Canadian historian who is currently teaching at San Diego State University in the United States.
Vietnam's history in the 20th century is filled with events that changed the fate of a nation and left their mark on the world. Few scholars outside Vietnam have studied this story as deeply as Professor Pierre Asselin from San Diego State University. His research spans the August Revolution of 1945 to the end of the American War, and today he joins us to reflect on the past and connect us to Vietnam's future. Professor Asselin, welcome to Talk Vietnam.
Thank you for having me, Lena.
Now I want to focus on the August Revolution. 1945, and this is a turning point that would forever change the fate and the history of the country. So how significant do you think this event is to the world history?
So one of the elements I really like about studying Vietnamese history is that whatever happened in Vietnam in the 20th century had such a momentous impact on world history. The August Revolution is, in a way, right, a manifestation of the Vietnamese desire to be decolonized. But at the same time, right, it's also a revolution that's intended to transform Vietnam along socialist lines. It's important to realize that as early as 45, through the August Revolution, Vietnam becomes a very, very significant player in these two extremely significant processes. Global decolonization, the end of empires. I think a lot of this has to do with the man who plays such a central role in the history of Vietnam in the 20th century, and that's Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh is a really remarkable individual. Again, not only in Vietnam, but internationally. But, you know, the vision he has for Vietnam, right? He wants Vietnam to be decolonized. And he devotes his life, really, to finding a solution to this problem of French colonization of Vietnam and the rest of Indochina. So after World War II, Ho Chi Minh decides to kind of capitalize on circumstances to initiate the decolonization of Vietnam. But at the same time, as we all know, right, Ho Chi Minh is also committed to a certain vision for Vietnam after independence. That is a keen observer of international politics and the situation in Vietnam.
So I think the essence here is he knew how to seize the moment.
Absolutely.
And really take advantage of the timing.
Yeah, this idea of a thời cơ, an opportune moment.
Yes.
Vietnamese leaders are always looking for these opportune moments. When they find them, they always try to capitalize upon, but they try to take advantage of them. That's kind of one of the elements that allows Vietnam to be eventually successful, this ability to recognize when circumstances are favorable and then to act on the basis of these favorable circumstances. And the August Revolution absolutely was an event that takes place because the leaders of the Vietnamese revolutionary movement recognized that this is an opportune time to seize power or to try and seize power.
Yeah. Why do you think declaring independence was such an important, event, milestone at that time?
I think that declaring independence, it signals to the people that we have, in the case of Vietnam, a committed leadership that wants to achieve independence, and then whoever wants to join us in supporting that endeavor should rally behind us. It's sort of a call to arms, right? A call to uprising. For the better part of the last 30 years, my research has really focused on the political aspects of Vietnamese history, and specifically the thinking, the policy making of Vietnamese leaders, people like Ho Chi Minh. For me, when I look at some of the things that Vietnam did very, very well, going through this very, very challenging history, I think that the leadership question it really stands out. Vietnam was lucky to have good leaders.
For nearly 30 years of dedication to researching Vietnam's history, Professor Asselin frequently visited the Vietnam National Archives Center No. 3 in Hanoi. There he had the opportunity to access authoritative sources that vividly reflected Vietnam's historical journey, especially the resistance war against the U.S. imperialist military for national salvation.
Pierre Asselin, ông là một trong những nhà nghiên cứu lịch sử, mặc dù từ Hoa Kỳ, cách nửa vòng trái đất, nhưng mà ông rất yêu thích cái lịch sử Việt Nam, cũng như là bản thân ông đã được thể hiện minh chứng đó là gì? Ông đã khai thác tài liệu lưu trữ tại Trung tâm Lưu trữ Quốc gia 3 từ rất sớm, từ những năm 90 khi mà trung tâm vừa được thành lập. Và cũng coi như là một độc giả trung thành đối với trung tâm. Và ông cũng đã khai thác được rất nhiều tài liệu mà hữu ích cho các công trình nghiên cứu của ông.
Over the past nearly 3 decades, Pierre has become America's foremost authority on the history of the American war in Vietnam as seen from the Vietnamese perspective. This was clearly very needed for a country to begin to comprehend what really took place in that historical period and to come to grips with the aftermath of the war.
Professor Pierre not only sought out documents or museums, but also met with families rich in revolutionary tradition to listen to stories not fully recorded in books. Today, Professor Pierre visits Mr. Nguyễn Văn Huy, son of the late Minister of Education Nguyễn Văn Huyên, to learn more about a scholarly and patriotic family, and more importantly, to feel how historical upheavals had a deep influence on the lives of every Vietnamese.
Pierre Asselin, khi anh chia sẻ với tôi, trong cái thời gian mà anh làm luận án tiến sĩ, anh đi đến tất cả rất nhiều các cái gia đình ở nông thôn Việt Nam và đặc biệt ở tỉnh Bắc Ninh. Anh thấy nhà nào cũng có những các cái bàn thờ liệt sĩ, và anh đặt một cái câu hỏi là làm thế nào mà Đảng Cộng sản Việt Nam lại có thể thuyết phục được người dân sẵn sàng hy sinh tất cả tài sản, xương máu, con cái của mình để vì cái nền độc lập của Tổ quốc. Đảng đã lãnh đạo như thế nào để mà có thể tất cả mọi người đều một lòng để đi theo cái đường lối kháng chiến, Trung Mỹ cứu nước và như thế. Và những cái chia sẻ của anh thực sự là nó đặt ra cho những người nghiên cứu như chúng tôi những các cái suy nghĩ để làm thế nào mà mình lý giải những cái điều đó ở trong cái bảo tàng tương lai.
Professor Pierre also attended many conferences and studied the Vietnamese language in order to engage better and gain more knowledge about Vietnam's history and people.
Nghiên cứu về dân tộc ít người ở 50 năm trước rất là
bảo tàng rất là quan trọng cho người Việt Nam mà cũng cho người nước ngoài để hiểu nhiều hơn về lịch sử Việt Nam.
Through every page of the archive and every conversation, Professor Pierre Asselin's love and bond with Vietnam grew deeper, as this land has become a part of his academic journey.
Can you elaborate more on the leadership of President Ho Chi Minh and also the Communist Party in achieving the outcome?
It's incredible looking at documents of the Communist Party specifically, how often there are references to the importance to be well organized, to have discipline, to have unity of views, and to have vigilance. And I think that for me, one of the things that the party always did well in Vietnam was provide leadership. And we all know how difficult the history of Vietnam was after 1945. And I think absent that leadership, the outcome is very different. I'm not taking anything away from the sacrifices, the heroism of the Vietnamese people. I mean, we don't need to discuss that. I mean, we all know about that, right? But being heroic without a purpose or a goal is going to lead to nothing. But when you match, the spirit of the Vietnamese people to the very clear direction that was provided by President Ho Chi Minh, then you become a formidable movement. And I think that's one of the reasons that the revolution is successful. And then, Ho Chi Minh is charismatic also. And that's another element, I think, that makes him stand out above other 20th century leaders.
So you think one of the key things here is that Ho Chi Minh and the Communist Party could mobilize and unify people from all walks of life because they set the righteous cause.
And they knew how to present that cause. I really think that when you look at the period of the American War, I think that there's a lot of reasons that account for why Vietnam won and the United States lost. But to me, central in all of this was the fact that the message by Ho Chi Minh was always clear. On the American side, the message was always changing. Whereas on the Vietnam side, the goal never changes. This fight is to achieve the national reunification and the national liberation of Vietnam.
And I think the slogan that Ho Chi Minh had still resonates until now. Nothing is more precious.
It's a catchy slogan. It sounds good. It's also dramatic, and it's inspiring. Another element where Vietnam was very, very competent, this ability to mobilize people. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu, how important it was to mobilize men and women to deliver supplies to the front. I mean, it's one thing to fight the French, but you can't fight the French if you don't have bullets.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If you don't have food, if you don't have water, the success is owed, I was going to say in part, but I would say largely to this ability to mobilize tens of thousands of these Zancong, right? These patriotic workers.
Yeah.
Many of whom come from minority groups.
Yes.
Who sacrifice so much to support the front. And to me, the ability to move supplies from bases all over Vietnam to Dien Bien Phu over the course of 55 days.
Yeah.
It's a feat of human ingenuity.
Yeah.
Professor Pierre Asselin visited Vietnam many times, and on each trip, he sought out historical museums as a way to revisit the memories of the past. Among them, the Vietnam Military History Museum left him with profound emotions, especially in the exhibition area on the resistance war against the U.S. imperialist military, the historical period to which he wholeheartedly committed himself to research.
The history of Vietnam and the military history of Vietnam is so rich. The different periods of Vietnamese history are well represented, and then in each period we really highlight the main developments that contributed to creating Vietnam as we know it today. I think that overall the museum does an absolutely wonderful job at presenting the very complex, the very rich Vietnamese past, and I think for visitors the museum, it's a real treasure, and it's a wonderful way of either improving the understanding of Vietnamese history and Vietnamese military history. So, I mean, as a museum, the Military History Museum really does what it's supposed to in terms of teaching visitors about this very, very central aspect of Vietnamese history and of the Vietnamese themselves.
So in retrospect, we talked about, the August Revolution, 1945. We talked about the American War in Vietnam. What lessons learned from those, resistance wars you think are still relevant to the younger generation today that we can learn from that?
I really hope the young people in Vietnam recognize just, how much had to be given by their grandparents, their great-grandparents, so that they can enjoy the life they have today. I remember one of the things that always impressed me about Vietnam when I first started coming here is just how much young Vietnamese people valued and appreciated history.
So here, as you mentioned, the course of 30 years from 1945 to 1975, many things happened during that period of time. What do you think are the ultimate factors that explain Vietnam's ultimate victory in 1975?
So, it's a great question. For me, I think that great as the Vietnamese are at war, I think they're better at diplomacy. For me, when you look back, it's really stunning how such a small country can mobilize allies, friends, individuals, groups all over the world in the support of its cause. I think that the Vietnamese themselves, starting in 1945, are going to do everything they can to draw attention to their situation. Mm-hmm. Right? It starts with President Ho Chi Minh.
Yep.
What does he do right after declaring independence? Right? He starts writing letters to the Americans. Mm-hmm. Right? He wants the Americans to help him keep the French out of Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Right? Through the period of the French War, right, efforts are made to negotiate with the French.
Yep.
And when that fails, efforts are made to engage with other countries that will help Vietnam fight the French. Over time, it allows them to isolate the Americans and triumph. Looking at Vietnamese documents, working in Vietnamese archives, it becomes very, very clear, very obvious how the Vietnamese are kind of driving their own history. They're masters of their own destiny.
The book, A Bitter Peace, Washington, Hanoi, and the Making of the Paris Agreement by Pierre Asselin, was published in 2002 in the United States and later translated into the Vietnamese language in 2012. The book depicts a period of tension when Washington and Hanoi confronted each other at the Paris Peace Accords negotiations, where each meeting session was a fierce battle of wits. While Washington sought a withdrawal with honor, Hanoi persisted in demanding a complete troop withdrawal to pave the way for national reunification. The 1973 Paris Peace Accords were struck in a fragile moment, as the sounds of gunfire had not truly ceased. The book portrays sacrifices, losses, resilience, and the yearning for freedom that shaped a major turning point in Vietnam's history.
So now let's talk about your books. You have written many books about Vietnam during your 30 years of research?
I came here in 1996.
Almost 40 years.
No, I'm not that old, am I? Almost 40 years, you're right.
Okay.
You're right, yeah.
So tell us about your books and maybe the highlights, the essence of each book that you wrote about Vietnam.
So the first book was based on my dissertation. So I was here for 9 months in 1996. I spent 9 months here in 1996 to research for my dissertation. And I decided to look at the negotiations between Mr. Ledecta and Henry Kissinger.
Yep.
It's such a difficult process, but in the end, it really served the interests of Vietnam. So I think it was my dissertation, which became my first book, that convinced me that, because at the time I thought, like everyone else, the Vietnamese are really good at war. But looking at this dance with the Americans, it convinced me that, I think the Vietnamese are also really good at diplomacy. Finding out more about Ledecta, about the strategy used in the Paris negotiations, it really stood out to me, the level of sophistication, which was never on display. And so that first book about diplomacy encouraged me to look more carefully at this particular aspect. I always thought the war began in '65, but then I realized that, that really the Americans sending troops to Vietnam, it's not the beginning of something. It's the culmination of a process. But then I decided to look at what led to the Americanization of these problems in Vietnam. So then the second book became the story of '54 to '65, strictly based on documents and other materials I collected from Vietnam. And it was so eye-opening. I started with the Geneva negotiations. And again, right, to see how the Vietnamese behave and how they play the different parties, right, it was fascinating.
So do you think that spirit of bamboo diplomacy we already showed, like those were like evidence of the bamboo diplomacy that we're talking about now?
Yeah, it's Vietnamese diplomacy. It's the, Vietnam has always had to be flexible.
So bamboo is has a characteristic.
Exactly. But that's the thing. To me, it's just traditional Vietnamese diplomacy.
Okay.
Vietnam has always had this flexibility.
You spent a lot of time working at the Vietnam's National Archives Center, number 3. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
So I've been. The first time I worked in the archives was in 1996. That was almost 30 years ago, right? The archive itself opened in 1995. Over time, I developed a good relationship. Since 1996, I go almost every year to the archives, and now it's much easier. And I think we trust each other.
Are there a lot of interesting documents stored at National Archives?
Sometimes there's more foreigners than there are Vietnamese, and these are government documents. These are, this is not something that people fabricate. It's very honest, and in terms of understanding, how Vietnam gets to where it is today. I mean, the collection is absolutely stunning. I've learned things going through materials that I'd never even considered, thanks to my work in the archives.
Can you give us some examples?
When you get bored working in an archive, you always ask for the materials you want to see, but then if you see something, the name of a file that looks interesting, you might throw it in there. So, I would always ask for documents about the situation in the South and the situation in the North. But then there was a file about culture and singers and dancers and a circus going to foreign countries. And that spawned a whole new area of research, because it turns out that as part of its effort to win over friends and allies, Vietnam would not just send representatives overseas to engage in high-level delegations. It would also send artists, singers, dancers, circus elephants, so that people in other countries could see that, well, the Vietnamese are good people, they're nice people, and they want to be able to enjoy a normal life. Basically, there was a whole cultural front, it seems, that was exploited by Vietnamese leaders during the war, which I think, I more and more believe, contributed to the world developing a good image of Vietnam, despite the war that was raging there.
The production team of Talk Vietnam paid a visit to Professor Pierre Asselin's long-standing workplace, National Archives Center Number 3.
it's my
This is where the archives Professor Pierre treasures the most are maintained, and which served as a foundation for his most significant research.
My second home in Vietnam, I guess. Yeah.
This is your favorite corner?
I like this corner a lot. Yeah, I like the. I don't know. It feels like I'm a historian when I'm surrounded by these volumes.
What are you looking at?
So I'm looking at pictures from the August Revolution. Mm-hmm. You know that Vietnam had a very famous photographer who basically kind of documented the whole period of the revolution, the war against France, the war against the Americans, Mr. Nguyen Ba Quang. They're very old, but they're probably like some of the best visual documents we have of what was going on in Vietnam in August and September of 1945.
So when you first came here, 30 years ago?
Yeah, 96, like 29 years ago, yeah.
How was that at that time, looking for documents? How did you communicate with them?
So it was really hard. So back then, especially when I came in, so I'd studied Vietnamese, figuring out, first of all, how to ask for what I want. Tôi đang nghiên cứu về một số vấn đề, nhất là ngoại giao của Việt Nam trong giai đoạn chống Mỹ. Thì là có tài liệu không? I start like this. Yeah. You find like a gold mine. If I found a political report that gave a very, very detailed a mountain of information, millions of pages of things that still allow you to get a really good understanding and insight into what North Vietnam was doing at various phases of the American War, in my case. We're doing this because we want to create a good image of North Vietnam. So, for example, when singers go to the socialist camp, right? Every song and the time and who's going to perform it's defined in these documents. So if you do this for a singer, what are you doing for the soldiers? What are you doing for the diplomats? A lot of Americans always wonder, like, how could the United States lose the war? Yeah. Right? How could they win? They're so poor. When you look at the documents, to me, you understand, like, oh, that's why. The level of sophistication, how much they study, how much they understand, not just themselves, but the outside world.
Well, thank you, Pierre, for sharing this very interesting angle about how cultural element was weaved into a strategy to help Vietnam send the messages to the world. Let's talk about the humane part of the war.
I feel like crying telling you this because, I've had conversations with Vietnamese, as everyone in Vietnam has, just giving you a sense of how sad it is to lose someone. After decades, people receiving the bones of a dead relative and just being completely devastated. 30 years after the fact, right? And so if that's 30 years after, how's a mother responding to the news that her son's not coming home? A professor once told me about the story of his wife's family, and essentially in seconds the family disappeared. I don't think a lot of nations could move past something as traumatic as the Vietnamese went through as well as they have. The ability to still be genuinely interested in welcoming Americans and other Westerners in spite of that history, to me, that's the spirit, today. But now it's this ability of the Vietnamese to reconcile the past with the present. That, to me, that's the spirit today, right? I mean, that's why I think when we talk about the Vietnamese, we want to emphasize the military successes. But if anything, today, Vietnam is committed to peace. So what becomes the spirit then? It's moving forward and recognizing that war is a temporary thing, and peace is the one that you want to have over a long term. But the forgiveness, the ability to reconcile, that the individual Vietnamese are manifesting toward the French, toward the Americans, toward the Japanese, toward people who really, really hurt them.
Vietnam also set itself a target that by 2045 we would become a developed country with high income. So from your viewpoint of history, how important is this milestone?
That was the vision of President Ho Chi Minh all along. When you look at his revolution, the goal is to bring peace and prosperity to Vietnam. I mean, Ho Chi Minh always talked about peace and prosperity. What was really driving Ho Chi Minh beyond liberating the country, right, and reclaiming sovereignty, was making sure that the people had prosperous lives.
So the vision is consistent.
And I think that's one of the many things I admire about the Vietnamese is that the consistency in terms of what's important and what we should strive to achieve. The goal of the Vietnamese Revolution, it was to have independence and peace and prosperity. What is different now is just the rapid pace at which Vietnam is progressing towards these developmental goals. And so setting 2045 as a target, I think the Vietnamese have always been target oriented. It's a sensible way of ensuring that Vietnam continues to move in the right direction.
Since the 1990s, when he first set foot in Vietnam, Professor Pierre Asselin has developed a special bond with the country and its people. His journeys, his encounters with historical witnesses, and the access to invaluable archives have nurtured his passion for research into the history of Vietnam. Over nearly 3 decades, Vietnam has become not only a subject of scholarly study, but also an essential part of Professor Pierre's career and life journey.
So you have studied Vietnam for almost 30 years. So how has your understanding and perception of Vietnam changed over the,
It's changed. Having been here in 1989, I especially now, I have this deep nostalgia for old Hanoi. It was so special. I remember. I mean, first of all, I had total culture shock when I first got here. I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
I'd never really been outside. I mean, to be honest with you, the first night I got to my dorm and I started crying. And I was thinking, what the hell have I done? But then, I got a bicycle and I started riding around, and then I started riding around at night, and it was. And I remember at one point seeing the moon and thinking, "Wow!" For the first time, I feel there's something familiar here. But I really learned to see like a side of Hanoi that I think is more difficult to see now.
Yeah.
It's such a bustling city now, so I think I miss some of that. But at the same time, it's so great to see people enjoying much more comfortable lives. I mean, life was so difficult in '89, even in 1996, and now to see the transformation of Vietnam, I cannot but be very, very happy for the people of Vietnam.
You have studied Vietnam through both hardships and victories. What thoughts do you think you would like to share with your students or with a younger generation?
Appreciating the past, the value of that past, I think is very, very. I think it's extremely important.
How much time do you spend learning about the past, and how much time do you spend thinking about the future?
I don't. That's a really good question. I should probably spend more time thinking about the future. I spend a lot of time reflecting on the past. Lena, like when I don't read novels. I always want to, but when I do, like I start reading and then I feel really guilty because I feel I should be reading a history book. I spend a lot of time reflecting on the past. I always think that, okay, if I go to Vietnam one more time, I'm gonna have all the answers. But then, I'm gonna do the visit, but then I'm gonna leave with even more questions. which will make me want to come back the following year. So it's amazing. After all this time, like it's almost like the more I know, the less I feel I know. And that's why I still feel year after year compelled to come back and work in the archives. You know, I know the archives pretty well, but still every time, you know, I learn something new. And Vietnam has given me that. I'm really, really grateful for that. It's made me curious, and it's really given me the motivation to continue being kind of a good professor for my students and a good researchers for my field.
So if you were to write a new chapter for your book about Vietnam, what would it be about?
You know, reflecting on all of this, I think maybe it would be like Pierre and Vietnam, a love story, ? You know, when I look back, everything I am, professionally and even personally, it's because of Vietnam. You know, I mean, this country completely changed my life, both professionally and personally. Vietnam has given me so much, which is why whenever I get a chance, I want to give back through helping my colleagues at universities over here, giving talks for students and things of that nature.
And other aspects of Chinese civilization.
Since 2017, Professor Pierre Asselin has been teaching at San Diego State University in the United States, where his history classes, especially those about Vietnam, always attract a large number of students. With his engaging storytelling, he guides learners from Vietnam's geography through the 1,000 years of Chinese domination, national heroines like the Cheng sisters and Lady Chiu, to religion, cuisine, and even the warm and personal way of addressing one another as anh chị em, or older brother, older sister, younger sibling. His lectures, illuminated by real-life experiences from many trips to Vietnam, help students gain a deeper appreciation of Vietnam's history and culture.
So I was really interested in it. I want to know more about what is this country that we've been so involved with as a nation, as a world, and learn about its history. And so it's perfect because Professor Pierre, he's such a eccentric guy, totally he's so passionate about history and the subject. And so every class takes, he's great.
So I took this class because I'm a Marine, so historically a lot of what I've learned about Vietnam. Professor Asselin in this class is able to give us more of a deeper cultural understanding on the background of Vietnam and the Vietnamese people.
I took this Vietnam class mainly because I want to explore and pursue a future within U.S. relations. And one of those big economic trading partners is Vietnam. I really want to understand history and how we came to be partners and how Vietnam itself came to be. I have utmost respect for Vietnam.
What is the biggest reward that you get from Vietnam?
I think it satisfies my curiosity. I think on the one hand, right, it every time I come, I get answers to questions that have been bothering me.
We are coming to the end of our program. Is there anything else you would like to share with our audience?
I guess I'd like to say thank you, Vietnam, you know, for giving me so much, and of course, you know, encourage everyone who would be watching to really kind of really pay attention to the Vietnamese past, because it's just so easy to get fixated on the present or on small moments. But I think that the whole history of Vietnam it's so interesting, and at the same time it's so crucial to make sense of the Vietnamese themselves and I guess where they're going to be moving forward.
Well, thank you so much for your sharing today.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully soon we will be able to read your new book about Vietnam.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Vietnam's story has always been about courage, determination, and vision. From the August Revolution to the victory in 1975, and now to the ambition of becoming a developed country by 2045. Thank you, Professor Pierre Asselin, for joining us today and sharing your insights about Vietnam. And this is not the sharing from a historian's perspective, but also a friend's reflections on Vietnam's journey. And we wish you continued success in your research about Vietnam.
Thank you.
And to the audience, we hope that you enjoy our discussion and see you again next time.
The Vietnam Today mobile app, the online platform to watch Vietnam's international television channel. Accessible across all devices, the free platform reaches millions of viewers in every corner of the globe. Here's how to get the app. Step 1. Open the App Store or Google Play on your device. Step 2. Search for the Vietnam Today app. Step 3. Tap to install. Step 4. Open the app and start watching. Download the Vietnam Today app now.